Lore of the Old World, Forces of Fantasy, Chapter 3, The Empire of Man. The Empire is both one of the largest and most powerful realms of man in the Old World, and a land torn asunder by civil war. Where once the powerful states and provinces stood shoulder to shoulder, united against their common enemies, today they stand alone, divided by politics. In recent years, the question of which great lord should bear the title of emperor has divided the land further, causing the armies of the elector counts to be forever on the march. The nation that would grow to become the empire took its first fledgling steps nearly 2,500 years ago, and much of what is known of it comes from the dwarf records of the time. The long wars between the dwarfs and the elves were over. The dwarfs had retreated to their mountain holds in the World's Edge Mountains, and the elves abandoned their cities on the Old World, crossing the sea back to the safety of their islands. Though the dwarfs remained, their influence was much weakened, for many of their most powerful kings were dead, and their holds overrun. When the mountains of the east erupted in flames and were riven by mighty earthquakes, the power of the dwarfs was finally broken, and a new enemy was to rise in strength and ambition: orcs and goblins. Hordes of the destructive brutes poured across the World's Edge Mountains, through the passes previously guarded by dwarf fortresses, to ravage the lands west of the mountains. As the dwarf realm reeled from the never-ending attacks of orcs and goblins, many human tribes began migrating southwards: Unberogans, Teutogens, Thurinians, Cherusans, Norsi, and Merregans, to name but a few. Fighting in common cause against orc and goblin warlords, it is certain that both dwarfs and men quickly recognized great potential in one another. The dwarfs saw allies who could help them win back their lost empire, and men were eager to learn the secrets of metalworking and the means of forging strong weapons of iron. The early human tribes were a far cry from the civilized men of the empire today. Clad in rough furs, they dwelt in mud huts and carried crude weapons of stone or bronze. The dwarf records tell that these men were fierce and courageous, battling the hordes of orcs and goblins for possession of the dark forests. The mightiest of these men was known as Sigmar, the first son of the Unberogan chieftain, whose birth was heralded by a twin-tailed comet blazing across the sky. Sigmar was a warrior of great nobility and strength, a true friend to the dwarfs, and, by the time of his coronation as emperor, a renowned warrior, who had swung his mighty warhammer Galmaraz in scores of battles against his enemies. Yet Sigmar's reign could not last forever, and though he ruled wisely from his capital of Reichdorf, later renamed Altdorf, for 50 years, and saw the rough villages of his people blossom and grow into great towns and cities, in his 80th year Sigmar would abdicate his throne and set off into the east, passing from the lands of men and into legend. In his absence, the tribal chieftains that had ruled under him elected a successor, and for a time the empire continued to thrive. But peace in the empire would not last, for mankind is ever warlike and quarrelsome. Men are eternally jealous and suspicious of their neighbours in equal measure, and strife amongst even the closest of allies is a surety. Within 100 years of Sigmar's disappearance, rivals for his throne were plotting and politicking. Within 1,000, plots had turned to threats, and the threat of civil war began to loom. The empire lies at the heart of the Old World, and it is the most powerful of all the realms of men. But it is a realm in constant turmoil, beset on all sides by the ferocious and the unholy, and seemingly irrevocably torn asunder from within by the warmongering of power-hungry elector counts, more interested in battling against their rivals over the imperial throne than uniting against their enemies. Truly the empire is a land of ever-present danger, where death and war are never far away. Yet despite the bloodshed, this great nation endures still, its cosmopolitan cities and military strongholds forming bulwarks against the sea of savagery. The empire stretches from the shores of the icy Sea of Claws in the north to the cloud-wreathed peaks of the soaring Black Mountains in the south. It is a land covered by dense primordial forests and surrounded by mountain ranges, all infested by murderous brigands, the roving warbands of Chaos Champions, foul mutants, and ravenous monsters. Isolated against this treacherous backdrop are prosperous cities, where skilled craftsmen and affluent merchants trade their wares, and where brave soldiers and noble statesmen work to safeguard the Empire's future. Beneath this veneer of sophistication, however, the Empire is a brooding land full of ignorance and superstition, where fearful peasants clutch talismans to ward off evil sorceries and appease the gods of old. In stark contrast to the wealthy districts are slums, rife with thieves, vagabonds, and heretical cults that prey on their fellow man. All aspects of human endeavour can be found within the Empire, and for every noble hero that walks the streets, there is a murderous cutthroat lurking nearby in their footsteps. A mass of brightly uniformed infantry forms the bulk of every Empire army. Disciplined ranks of spearmen and grim halberdiers march into battle alongside companies of flamboyant swordsmen, their advances covered by the fire of vast blocks of archers, handgunners, and crossbowmen. Countless thousands of these loyal soldiers are ready to defend their realm. Beside these brave troops march disillusioned bands of flagellants, fiery warrior priests, and grim witch hunters, tasked with dealing out righteous retribution to the manifold evils of the world. The armies of the Empire's many warring states can also call upon the expertise of the famous gunnery school, which, from prolific forges within the free states of Null, produces an endless supply of mighty cannons and mortars to blast the foe from afar. Alongside the tried and true guns of the gunnery school, the armies of the Empire readily employ the experimental creations of the Imperial Engineers School, the inventive students of which eagerly supply some of the most unpredictable and deadly tools of war imaginable to sponsors from all corners of the Empire. Both revered institutions claim no political affiliation, and seem content to sell their weapons of war without any thought for how such weapons might be used to further the ambitions of warring electors. Finally, the armies of the Empire are bolstered by the heavy cavalry of the knightly orders, noble-born warriors clad in the finest polished steel. When war calls, the Grand Masters of the knightly orders lead their men forth, galloping towards the foe in sweeping charges as they drive their lances deep into the heart of the enemy battle line. In the history of the world, there has never been a greater alliance than that struck between the ancient tribes of men and the dwarfs, for in Sigmar the dwarfs found an ally worthy of their respect and trust. Dwarfs have long memories, and they have not forgotten Sigmar's deeds, nor the pledge of friendship they made with the barbarian king. Thus they will always march in defence of the old alliance, for in a world infested by savage enemies, true friends are hard to find. The armies of the Empire are led by warriors well trained to direct their forces as effortlessly as a swordsman wields a blade. First and foremost among these great leaders are the Elector Counts, inspirational and famous individuals whose mere presence can steady a wavering battle line. Others are trusted officers chosen to lead their province's forces. Many such officers will also be of noble birth, educated in martial pursuits from an early age, falconry, swordsmanship, and hunting beastmen in the forests. Still others have risen through the ranks from humble origins, but regardless of their station, the vast majority will be tried and tested veterans of many years who have a fine understanding of the craft of soldiering, have spent most of their lives fighting. The status of wizards varies greatly from one province of the Empire to another. In the Reichland, seat of the cult of Sigmar, magic is universally outlawed, and its practitioners, when caught, are burnt at the stake as witches. In neighbouring Talabecland, by contrast, where the worship of Tal is commonplace, wizards enjoy greater freedom to practice their craft. Yet wherever wizards reside, superstition and distrust of their powers is rife among common folk, leading most sensible wizards to seek the favour and protection of imperial nobles and military officers. As such, practitioners of magic can be found in courts and barracks across the Empire, masquerading as wise advisors and trusted counsellors only revealing the extent of their powers when called upon to do so in battle. The knightly orders of the Empire are organized along strict lines of hierarchy, with every novice trained in martial virtues and the chivalric code until they are ready to take up the mantle of a fully fledged knight. As a warrior attains honor on the battlefield and proves their worth, they will ascend through the ranks of their order, hoping one day to join the order's veteran knights in the inner circle. From here, the most capable warriors can progress to command their own chapter house, and perhaps one day attain the rank of Grand Master. When an imperial noble petitions the knightly order for aid, it is sometimes a condition that the chapter master or Grand Master personally take the command of the army. The Empire is a land torn asunder by civil war and besieged by myriad evil threats. In such an environment, it should come as no surprise that the many churches that vie for the faithful servitude of the citizens would take it upon themselves to hunt out evil. Thus, witch hunters roam the land in the service of all the great churches and temples, all intent upon casting out that which their patron considers most evil. Zealous Templars of Sigmar hunt mutants, heretics and witches, whilst fanatical priests of Mor seek out necromancers and vampires. Yet for all the diversity shown by witch hunters, one thing remains constant: their arrival in an isolated town provokes fear and bloodshed. Sigmar, the patron god of the Empire, is a warrior god, and to follow his creed is to live a life of battle. The cult of Sigmar demands that its followers must fight all forms of evil with strength of arm and sword, as well as faith, and many of its priests accompany the Empire's armies as they march to war. In this role, they not only lead and inspire troops in battle, but also minister to their spiritual well-being. On many occasions, a rousing speech or tour of camp by a warrior priest of Sigmar has restored faith, brought hope, or stayed a mutiny when the words of even the most respected general have fallen on deaf ears. Ulrich is the mighty god of battle, wolves, and winter, a proud warrior god who expects his followers to make their way in the world by directness, bravery, and force of arms. He is acknowledged across the Old World, but the centre of his worship is Middenheim, the city of the White Wolf in the north of the Empire. Ulrich is a pragmatic god, and his church is less overtly pious than that of Sigmar, rarely inclined to dogmatic preaching. However, Ulrich is the patron of soldiers, and every priest of his cult is a warrior first and foremost. Thus many of his priests find their calling in formal armies and mercenary regiments, strengthening the faith of Ulrich's followers by their own example. Imperial engineers are eccentric scientists, many of whom can be found in the Imperial Engineers School in Altdorf, tinkering with new and experimental technologies. Their burning need to try out their latest creations also brings them onto the battlefield, where they employ their most successful pieces of machinery to the advantage of their comrades. Engineers are normally occupied sniping at the enemy with a variety of powerful experimental handguns, but sometimes they cannot resist the appeal of being in charge of the artillery fire, muttering incomprehensible gobbledygook and bustling from one machine to another. Even if the gunners are quite puzzled by the engineers' unintelligible theories about the parabolic motion of projectiles, their presence does increase the accuracy of the artillery. The many states and provinces of the Empire all favour their own unique breeds of horses. The horses of Averland, for example, are famed for their strength and speed. Those of the Reichland are thick-boned and renowned for their stamina, and those of Marienburg are prized for their turn of speed and fiery natures. These different character traits and this variety of physical type means that in the armies of the Empire, different cavalry roles can easily be met by a plentiful supply of horses best suited for reason of type and temperament. Knights and officers of the Empire ride to war mounted upon large and powerful destriers, seemingly unencumbered by the weight of barding and armour they carry. By contrast, light cavalry such as pistoliers are often mounted atop fast and agile horses. The Pegasus is a winged beast that looks much like a horse, but is cunning and intelligent beyond the measure of any ordinary steed. To be properly tamed they must be caught and reared as foals, taken from their nests high in the grey mountains. Once tamed, they are loyal creatures who willingly obey their masters and respond to the slightest command. In the heart of the Reichwald forest there lurks many foul and fearsome creatures. However, there also dwell beasts of a more noble heritage. Of these it is most famously and frequently demigryphs that are chosen as mounts for the most virtuous and battle-hardened knights, for these great beasts have proven themselves as loyal and powerful steeds on countless battlefields in the Empire's proud history. Every province and city-state in the Empire has its own standing army of professional soldiers, equipped and maintained at the expense of that realm. These brave troops are armed with a wide variety of weapons, from spears to handguns, but they are all known collectively as state troops. State troops are paid as full-time professional soldiers, ready to answer the call to arms at all times. In addition to forming a standing army to repel enemy attack, state troops also serve as city guards, the fire watch, and the enforcers of the law. However, most of the time these soldiers spend their days drilling and training with various weapons to the barked instructions of grim-faced sergeants and veteran marksmen. Every state trains its regiments to fight together, providing each other with mutual protection on the battlefield. State regiments often march to battle with detachments of differently armed troops to aid them. These detachments form up close to their regimental units where they guard vulnerable flanks and provide battlefield support, either by joining their regimental units in the bloody melee of close combat or by showering oncoming enemies with missile fire. Swordsmen fight shoulder to shoulder with spearmen, the close range parries and riposts of swords complementing the longer reach of the spear. Handgunners and crossbowmen fell their foes with withering volleys of fire, but should a foe survive through such salvos, a detachment of halberdiers will bravely intercept them, cutting them down with heavy-bladed polearms. Militia are regiments recruited, willingly or not, to fight as required, and no one can foretell how many will answer the Count's muster. Some of these troops will be grim mercenaries, used to living by the strength of their sword arm, while others will be peasants levied from the local countryside. Consequently, the quality of militia regiments varies wildly. The Empire's archers are normally organised into small groups of skirmishers who support the regimented units in battle. Trappers and hunters from the wilder, less civilized provinces are often called to serve in such roles. These masters of the wilderness scout ahead of the main body of the army to gather intelligence, disrupt enemy movements, and pick off war machine crews with deadly accurate bowfire. Every member of a greatsword regiment is a distinguished and decorated veteran of the state troops, personally chosen to serve amongst the ranks of the elite by their commanding officers. Equipped with deadly two-handed swords and superb suits of full-plate armour, greatswords swear to never give ground to the enemies of the Empire, fighting to the death if need be. The history of the Empire is rich with episodes where these brave soldiers were cut down to a man in a last stand around their banner after all the rest of the army had been defeated. Such devotion is well rewarded, as veterans of this elite corps are sometimes knighted, a great honour for a humble warrior. The Old World is a dangerous and often cruel place, where war, plague, and the vagaries of nature can destroy whole towns and force their inhabitants to become beggars, vagabonds, and brigands. It is probably no wonder that many are driven mad by the terrible hardships that they suffer, and many see their condition as a sign that they are living in the last days of a dying world. It is quite common for these hordes of penniless zealots to band together under the leadership of some ranting madman, a preacher of apocalyptic doom. These bands travel the towns and cities of the Old World, following in the wake of marching armies, to spread their nightmarish vision of doom and despondency. Regiments of pistoliers are recruited from the younger sons and daughters of imperial nobles, eager to win their spurs as knights, and for whom the clarion call to arms pounds in their veins. Some may gather their friends and form regiments of their own, but most join the ranks of the Pistol Corps, a semi-formal organisation funded by the colleges of engineers and several knightly orders. In battle, pistoliers act as light cavalry who gallop around the enemy flanks, disrupting formations and launching devastating hit-and-run attacks with their pistols blazing. Equipped from the opulent armories of their families, each pistolier cuts a dashing figure with their flamboyant livery, plumed helmet, and brace of pistols. Many of the young men and women who survive their time in the pistoliers go on to join a knightly order and put the skills and scars they have earned to good use as a fully armoured knight. Others, for whom the thrill and excitement of life in the pistoliers is too hard to relinquish, stay with their regiment or go on to become drill instructors in the pistol corps. These veterans typically wear more ornate armour and frequently lead the headstrong pistoliers into battle. At other times they form separate regiments of outriders for the College of Engineers, each equipped with deadly repeater handguns, weapons capable of unleashing devastating storms of lead at long range. The noble-born warriors of the Empire do not form part of any state standing army or rub shoulders with the common soldiery. Instead, they typically fight for one of the knightly orders, heroic brotherhoods of warriors who ride into battle atop mighty barded warhorses. Knights are magnificent figures, clad in gleaming suits of heavy plate armour and armed with weaponry of the finest quality. The sight of a regiment of knights charging full tilt at the enemy is a terrifying prospect for the Empire's foes to face. As the knights thunder onwards, they are likened to an avalanche of steel and muscle, and those enemies not spitted on the end of sharpened lances are crushed beneath the trampling of iron-shod hooves. Knightly orders are organised along strict lines of hierarchy, and every knight adheres rigidly to the codes of conduct and etiquette their station demands. At the top of this hierarchy are the Knights of the Inner Circle, an elite warrior brotherhood of the Order's most celebrated veterans. These heroic warriors epitomize the warrior virtue of the knightly orders, for they have accomplished mighty feats of arms, slaying their foes on countless battlefields. The Knights of the Inner Circle are the elite of the elite, and amongst the best fighting men of the entire Empire. When the courageous Knights of the Inner Circle go to war, it is only to fight the most diabolical enemies, and their presence on the battlefield is worth many times their number. Amongst some knightly orders, the final trial laid before one that would join the Inner Circle is to capture a demigryph and break it to their will. Unsurprisingly, many fail and are torn to bloody ribbons. As a result, there are relatively few demigryph knights in the Empire, and even the Knights Griffin, who count dozens of these majestic beasts among the honoured tenants of their magnificent stables, still rely primarily on the more conventional steeds. In battle, demigryph knights prefer to engage the enemy in protracted assaults where the strength and endurance of their fearsome mounts becomes decisive. Demigryphs are well suited to the savage and bloody nature of such fighting, with their claws and razor-sharp beaks cutting a bloody swathe through their foes. To the devout citizens of the Empire, there can be few sights more inspirational than that of a lector of the cult of Sigmar riding to war atop a gleaming war altar, protected within an armoured pulpit as they deliver their sermons and extol their followers to greater fervour. These magnificent carriages of lacquered wood and dressed stone, drawn to war by powerful barded warhorses, creak beneath the weight of towering effigies, such as gilded griffins and great stone warhammers, their iron-bound wheels carving deep ruts into the earth behind them. Though once a common sight, these glorious chariots have become scarce during long years of civil war, many having been desecrated and destroyed by the priests of rival cults. Steam tanks are monstrous, smoke-belching engines of war, powered by a pressurized boiler that siphons steam through pipes and pistons. In battle they rumble towards the enemy, firing deadly cannonballs from their steam-powered guns. The advance of these iron behemoths is terrifying to behold, as arrows ricochet from armoured hulls and enemy warriors are crushed beneath their immense bulk. Only 12 steam tanks were originally built, and those that remain are carefully maintained by the College of Engineers. Should one be destroyed in combat, all efforts are made to recover, and wherever possible rebuild the machine. However, many of the secrets of their construction have been lost, and the surviving steam tanks are becoming increasingly unreliable and inefficient. In battle, the engineer commander of a steam tank directs the pressurized steam to whichever portion of the tank requires it, be it the pistons that drive the wheels or the tank's steam-powered weapons. As the steam tank is not built with any instruments for determining the pressure in the boiler, the commander must instead rely on the intensity of the gurgling noises, the hissing sound of steam escaping from the imperfectly sealed piping, and the clouds of vapour that accumulate around him. It is a delicate art to judge how much pressure the boiler can hold. If too much pressure builds, the engineer runs the risk of rupturing the boiler, an event that typically entails a catastrophic event. Griffins are wild creatures that hunt from the tallest crags of the world's edge mountains, soaring on huge feathered wings. A griffin's head and forequarters resemble those of a powerful eagle, its hooked beak and clawed forelegs easily able to tear through plate armor. Behind its wings, a griffin's body is furred and massively powerful, its hindquarters those of a mighty lion. Their pelts can vary enormously in appearance, some with golden or striped fur like that of a great exotic cat. Brave Empire adventurers seek out griffin nests and steal their chicks to raise in captivity, singling out the strongest, cleverest and most ferocious to be raised and trained as mounts for their lords. The great cannons of the Imperial Gunnery School are the terror of the Empire's foes. Their thunderous fire sends iron balls hammering into the ranks of enemy warriors, each impact ploughing bloody furrows through tightly packed regiments. Even the mightiest creatures cannot ignore the power of a great cannon. More squat than great cannons, mortars lob shells high into the air, which then fall amongst the enemy. Instead of solid shot, mortars fire hollow shells topped with a fizzing fuse and filled with black powder. Shells explode in the heart of a target regiment, sending fragments of burning iron scything through enemy ranks and killing whole swathes of warriors at once. The Hellblaster volley gun is one of the most infamous black powder weapons ever invented. Its devastating firepower able to tear apart an entire regiment in one thunderous volley. Its 9 separate barrels are divided into 3 decks and are turned by means of a central crank, which means that it can unleash devastating hails of shot that engulf its unfortunate target in a firestorm of leaden death. But with such devastating power comes great risk. Hellblaster volley guns are notoriously prone to sudden cataclysmic explosions. As a result, those crewmen who operate a machine so prone to catastrophically blowing them to tiny pieces tend to be paid up with the priests of Mor. The Hellstorm rocket battery was inspired by a particularly impressive fireworks display. Early prototypes blew apart an entire floor of the Imperial Engineers School, but the soot-blackened engineers persevered and succeeded in creating a deadly, if unpredictable, weapon. The shrieking rockets fired by this bizarre machine are wildly inaccurate weapons that have little chance of hitting anything other than, eventually, the ground. Many refinements, such as fins, counterbalances, and a launch carriage to direct the early portion of the rocket's flight, have all been made to improve the stability and accuracy, though none have met with any particular success. However, when these rockets do land on target, the results are devastating, entire regiments being blown apart by a series of earth-shaking explosions. The museums and treasure houses of the Empire are filled with wondrous artifacts of great power and significance. Many of them were forged by the hands of human smiths and artisans, and either blessed by the prayers of priests or enchanted by the magic of wizards. But more were crafted by the hands of other races, such as the dwarfs of the World's Edge Mountains, or the elves of Ulthuan. Whilst most of these treasures had come into the possession of their owners fairly, given freely as gifts or traded through honest means, other came as the spoils of war, trophies taken from the corpses of vanquished foes. Whatever the case, the warriors of the Empire are seldom short of magical assistance when they march to war. Sitting at the heart of the Old World's southern trade routes, Nuln is the Empire's second largest city that, in previous times, was home to the court of the Emperor. Today the city stands as an independent free state. and remains Altdorf's largest rival, both politically and economically. Nuln is most famed for being the home of the Imperial Gunnery School, a sprawling network of forges and smelteries, where veteran gunsmiths manufacture and maintain the Imperial artillery trains. Steam-powered air pumps work night and day to vent the acrid fumes of the blazing foundries, and portions of Nuln are forever wreathed in pools of choking soot and black smoke. Indeed, the dark smog clouds hanging over Nuln are such a permanent feature that many travellers use them to navigate.